Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Go Ahead Tell Me. My name's Carly, and today I am joined by filmmakers Rami Kodeih and Nora Celine. They're here to talk about their work as filmmakers as well as their one of their more recent films, Alina. So, Rami and Nora, I'd love to get started just by hearing a little bit about you guys and your journey to where you are now as filmmakers.
Yeah, totally. Um, well, uh, if I want to talk to about myself, I studied film school in Beirut, and after that started working in documentaries really there because jumping immediately into narrative is not something that's kind of immediate in our back home basically.
Hmm.
Now I live in the U.S. That's why I'm saying back home. Um, yeah, so it's very much like either inherited by the elite or needs a lot of self initiation for someone who's completely independent, middle class, to jump immediately into narrative. So that's why I worked in documentaries a lot, and I'm thankful for that because it ended up being eventually such a great source and such an educational source actually to feed our work in narrative. And I met Nora in Beirut, and
Hmm.
we started dating. That did not last for a while before jumping together, both of us, and start working together. And it's been a joy ever since. And I'm talking like that's been since 2011, and we've been a couple since then, and collaborators since then. So yeah, and
That's amazing.
I'm sure Nora has also
Yeah, he dragged
something
me into. No, he didn't drag me into this.
something to contribute to my story. But yeah, I'll let her like
It's not a bad thing to
jump
be
there.
dragged into, though.
No, it's not. It's a lot of fun. The irony is that I was born and raised in LA, where obviously a
Mm.
lot of people are in filmmaking, but it didn't occur to me. I grew up. I'm the daughter of immigrants, and nobody in my family does film or anything like that. So I studied literature up north at Stanford, and then traveled to Beirut, not expecting to necessarily stay that long. But after meeting Rami and kind of transferring my love of writing into documentary, I got
Mm.
really hooked. So and so we've been kind of collaborating ever since then. Yeah.
How fun. So you weren't even like pursuing film at the time?
No, just writing. I loved journalism. I loved fiction writing, but to be totally honest, I didn't really see at the time a lot of people like me in the film world. So it didn't occur to
Hmm.
me, that people like us could exist.
Right.
There weren't a lot of brown ladies in film, when I was a kid. So now hopefully that's changing, and like kids coming up now will, from an earlier age, think that these things could be possible for them because they are. But it just didn't occur to me that that was a viable career path.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even just like as women, even it's been just like a more recent thing to see women behind the camera, I think.
Yeah, it totally. And to Rami's credit, like he's a feminist through and through. So for him, it's always like there should be more women in film, and so he was always very encouraging, not only for me but just in general. So that helps too, right? When you have people
Hmm.
that are creating kind of an inviting environment for you to try it out.
Yeah, and that support is so important.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So what was it about documentaries that drew you in? I feel like literature to documentaries is a little bit a big change, right? You're going from, like you said, you were into fiction work. Um, how was that change for you?
Yeah, I think it came out of a love of, even though I loved fiction, I love of journalism.
Hmm.
And, I think even the fiction work that I love, both just kind of reading or even the movies watching, a lot of it is inspired by the reality of the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm interested in real life, even if it's fiction. So it kind of was, it's interesting with documentary because you're not really scripting it from imagination. You have to kind of go with where your subjects, where the real people kind of take that story.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think, Rami, I'm curious I don't think I've ever asked you why you got interested in documentary yourself, but
to me at first, like, that goes back to film school and maybe to high school, like you were saying, like there's one of the, like, in the last 2 years of high school, I almost got into journalism, but then shifted and thought maybe I should do sciences, and then my biology teacher told me you should stick with what you're feeling in your heart, and what you're feeling is acting and theater and audiovisual, and that equals ultimately what we call cinema. So my first attempt to do something that's a documentary was in film school in the 4th year, and it's a very good film school, to be honest. Like I'm thankful for them because they treated us like we didn't have a break for like 5 years. We were constantly either being fed a lot of history of photography, history of art, history of theater, history of graphic, not everything, in terms of like what you consume theoretically, but at the same time we were bombarded by a lot of like, go film this, come back, go film that, come back. It was a French system, so and it's very active, and it's very robust as a program. So going back to the question, I was intrigued when I did that first documentary in film school, and I'm like, oh, this is something that one could have not just like fun doing, but it's so educational. You sit and you meet with people, and you develop an ability that I would call curiosity. Your curiosity is something, and then while doing documentaries, especially when you're meeting a lot of interesting people, that curiosity becomes bigger and bigger and bigger with time. And so that's why. And like I said before, the real passion was to immediately jump into narrative, and I tried like immediately to try to write like shorts, but it's difficult. It's not like film school where like everything, where a short film or a narrative is actually an exercise that you're that's asked for you to do. You know what I mean? Like it's something that you're asked by the program to do. After that, it becomes like, oh, okay, so you have to budget it. It costs this much and this much, and it's actually extremely hard to raise money for it, and features even harder, etc., etc. So that's why doing documentaries for me was kind of not an immediate choice, but I ended up doing it, and I ended up trying everything, like a lot of things in it, and it was for for TV stations, basically. Like it was not something that you do it on your own, because it becomes even worse than fiction in terms of like raising the money and entering a production and spending like years with your character, and you have to pay rent at the same time. So, right? Like so that's what happened. So I told myself something: if the road of documentary is inevitable, let me sometimes treat it as if like I'm doing, like I'm practicing narrative, but it's actually a real subject. You see what I mean? In terms of like how you're filming, in terms of cinematography, in terms of how you're using the sound, in terms of trying things out, in terms of also asking your character, who's a real person, who's being themselves to behave and to act in front of the camera, and they're great. Every time we were like with an interesting character, they were actually absolutely great, and you ended up I ended up learning a lot from them.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, I feel like I'm a huge documentary like film nerd. So I love that like documentaries, I feel like are these, as a filmmaker behind the scenes, you kind of are creating a narrative out of real life, which I think is so like impactful too. Like I always feel like watching a documentary, I like learned so much from the film while also getting this really like important story. And to see that it's somebody's real life is also just so like such a dynamic that you don't always get in narrative films. But
Absolutely.
I've list or your newest film, is it your newest film, Alina? Is that, was that 2019?
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I was gonna ask, I feel like that, I know that is a narrative, but it also is based on true events, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Would you mind going into that a little bit? I feel like that kind of ties into your guys' work as documentary filmmakers as well.
Sure. Yeah. It is. It is. As we're talking, I'm realizing. Yeah. It does. It come from a little bit of a journalistic interest. We stumbled on the story on the women that the short is inspired by during the 2016 elections, and it just kind of stuck with us. And as we started kind of researching it more and more, felt that it'd be great to try to put this story out there so more people can kind of learn about it. The true story of these female smugglers is so huge, and it's like it covers several years and so many characters. So we had to kind of do a composite and distill it down into like a short that we can manage to make ourselves and kind of produce with available means. It's not a big Spielberg production or anything like that, but it was great to kind of figure out, okay, how do we take all this research and try to focus it as much as possible. So the whole story takes place in one night with a limited amount of characters, and it was a good exercise because it kind of makes you realize like what it really comes down to are like the human dynamics and emotions, which is that's the core of the story, is the relationship between these women and how they were reacting to the Nazi occupation and to the separation of between themselves and their family members, which is something that is resonant today. So it was, I think the documentary research was really useful, just having that background and having that kind of education.
Yeah, and for those listening who aren't familiar with the film, it's women like fighting to save children and like through the Holocaust, correct?
Yes, exactly.
And it's such a like big story to put into such a short amount of time, but you guys have like you pulled it off, and it's winning awards and everything right now, right?
Thank you. Yeah, we're just amazed that it got seen because the pandemic hit, and we're kind of amazed that that through the determination of film programmers who are like, we're going to still put on festivals no matter what. So, props to them. But it's been kind of great that it's still reaching some people and some audiences. Even when theaters were closed down and we were all stuck at home. So that was encouraging for sure.
Yeah, I've talked to a few filmmakers over the last few months, and the way that the festivals have been handled through the pandemic has been really impressive.
Agreed.
And then so I did read somewhere like reading about this film and about you guys as filmmakers, that part of the like inspiration or like behind this film was started like at the Jewish Museum in LA. And then I read that you guys said that there were the like guide was talking about people who aren't usually talked about in history, and that's kind of where this idea came from, which I thought was really neat because there's so much that we don't learn about in history, like in school and just like what we're exposed to normally. So the story that you guys have taken on of women in the Holocaust, which is something we don't really talk about much, I was hoping you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, they were really, really helpful. We, yes, we knew that we wanted to tell. So there's a really famous female smuggler called Irina Sendler. So we kind of were, that's the person we were researching, just kind of her and her network. And when we went to the museum, um, the 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 expert there, the specialist there, kind of was telling us about life in the Warsaw Ghetto, during the Holocaust. We're just kind of saying there are really, okay, people know of the few famous, really famous figures, like Oscar Schindler, for example,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know about kind of the unsung heroes. There are tons of them whose like names are very much buried in sort of the footnotes of history.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, maybe surprisingly or unsurprisingly, like a lot of those figures that were kind of forgotten or not really taught in schools or in history classes were young women, or just women in general that were not privileged. So these were young women who were like in their 20s, early 20s. Some of them had just finished college. They were all kind of working class, I would say, like blue collar, and they saved more children collectively than really anybody. So that was really interesting. Is like it just speaks to the power of like the regular person.
Mm-hmm.
In a dark moment of history, it's the figures that get kind of the attention are the really famous, the politicians, the big war heroes,
the
leaders,
yeah,
ambassadors,
these
etc.
are the ones that...
And that's not to discount, of course, any work those men did, but it's always, it's, to me, I relate more, and Rami, I'm assuming you agree, right?
Absolutely.
When I see a character on screen that I might know in real life, when
Yes.
I'm seeing somebody
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, oh, that could have been my sister, that could have been my mother, that could have, that
Mm-hmm.
that to me is like really, that hits me in a different way, because I'm just like, oh my God, they were so resourceful and so creative and so brave, but they weren't like trained. They weren't doing this as a trained profession, or they weren't doing this because they had the money to do it. They were just like scrappy. And I love, Rami and I both love characters like that. We relate to it in a weird way where, these are people that we kind of grew up with. By that I mean people, like regular people.
Yeah, it pulls in your emotions a little bit more when you feel like you could know this person, as opposed to like a glorified in deservingly in most cases, but it's such a different emotion you feel when you feel like you can know that person, like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's I love that you guys are telling a story of women as well, because it's, our history is so dominated, I feel like, by white men, and so it's refreshing to see a different take on history and showing a story that's not told as much.
That's true. It helps that both of us were, especially Rami, I mean, you could speak to that, but Rami, you were surrounded by women that kind of held communities together in conflict, right? So it's something you witnessed firsthand.
Yeah,
in terms of the power of women.
Absolutely, yeah. Like basically, I grew up in I was born in the middle of the Lebanese Civil War, like in the 80s. So
wow.
And like basically between my mom and my aunt and their friend, and like these people were like so much around like after the war, because there's something I always say, and I learned actually from the documentary work, which is like a war always starts and ends, but what's really difficult to deal with is the aftermath. And the aftermath, that was very much like during the war and the aftermath. Like it's it was very like, a lot of people say that the Middle East is it's a patriarchal place. Maybe that's what it is in terms of like in general, but it's not the way how I grew up. Absolutely not the way how I grew up. I grew up very much like surrounded by a lot of strong women, starting with my mom and going to my aunt and their friends and neighbors and everything. So yeah, it's so normal for me as a man to see. It's natural and normal for me to see a strong woman. Even the classmates at the time, like there were a lot of. I mean, that's not. It's like this is very like on the fun part, right? Like it's a lot of women were a lot stronger in basketball than men. Seriously, yeah. And in the 90s, like that's what it is. Like usually, the boys were playing soccer and the girls were playing basketball. And at some point, I was playing a little bit of soccer and a little bit of basketball. So when I was playing basketball, I used to play with the young women back then. Very strong. That's what I have to say in terms of physical strength and in terms of
mental
personalities.
agility. Yes.
Yeah, personalities. Seriously.
I love that. I love hearing that perspective from a man too. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's very like if I haven't seen it and experienced it myself, I wouldn't be saying it right now. Yeah.
It came natural, is what he's saying. It's really natural to see.
Yeah.
To have the heroes be female. Yeah.
Well, I hope it becomes a more natural thing for everyone else too, because it's hard to see people who don't have that kind of perspective on life and the people around them. You talked a little bit about the war that you grew up around, and I saw a quote from you that really hit me and like has stuck with me. And you said that the only way to counter hate is with love, and I just kind of wanted to bring that up because that was such a like profound thing to me. It's like it's such a simple thing, but also nobody experiences or like actually does that, actually just realizes that, oh, I can counter this hate with love. And there's so much hate in this world right now, and I thought that was a really important quote to bring up from you.
Yes, because it's if you think about it, like basically our society in Lebanon in general is has a lot of like 18 religious groups basically that hate each other, basically, right? Like it's and the formation of such a small country was based on intentionally putting these communities together and plant the seed of hate between them, so that that specific place remains weak and easily penetrated by colonization and like other political entities from abroad, basically. So but it's such a small country to the point where like you grow up like getting along with the whoever is from another religion and another group or anything like that. So, and our household, which I'm very thankful for, was extremely secular. So you get taught that concept of love from a very, very early age, and you behave like it. And sometimes you just I used to be shocked when I'm actually hated, because like why am I why is there a sectarian act against me when I'm actually not feeling that feeling, which is the sectarianism or like the hate that comes with it, right?
Right.
So I was raised like that. I was raised like that. I'm so thankful for both of my parents that they raised me in a way that's extreme, like genuinely secular, and that like, it's interesting because when I immigrated to the States, it's you have racism here, while we had like sectarianism there, and they're both like it's they're both like acts of hate, right? So yeah, I was equally shocked here in the way how the system is working. Sometimes even with like I hate to say it, but sometimes even with people that are liberal, they don't even know that they're acting in a way that's racist. See what I mean?
Yes,
like it's when you're actually like, but why can't we just treat each other as human beings? It's very simple. Love can be very, very simple, but fear is what's planted in people's heads, and that leads to a lot of hate, and that's very complicated. It became when the act of love is something very simple.
Yes.
The act of hate became like extremely complicated and so difficult to actually like to repair. You can try your best. You can keep trying through your work, through your behavior as a human being in the street and in society. But yeah, it's I mean, one could say that there's a lot of profit from hate, and sometimes less profit from love, and
profit from conflict and hate, and
yes, exactly.
Yeah. But not for regular people. That's the thing.
That's
you gotta
thing.
remember, like, regular people will benefit from acts of just decency and compassion and human to human connection, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
it brings happiness. It brings genuine feeling of like satisfaction and happiness. Like even, you know what I mean? Like even when you're going to grocery shopping and you just like behave normally and like with a little bit of love in you towards the other, that creates a feeling of not to go like clinical, but like it brings a little bit of serotonin and like endorphin in your head, so you feel,
yeah,
you feel, you know what I mean?
Scientifically proven that your brain releases chemicals that we call this happiness when you act in a way that is positive towards the person in front of you. So it's really to a person's own benefit. It's like a healthy thing to do. But yeah.
Well, and it goes such a long way too. I mean, just like the grocery store example, like you never know what the other person is experiencing. And if you can just be one like polite and loving person in that person's day, can change the whole outlook of the rest of their day. And you never know who you save from having a horrible day and like bringing them back into a positive place. It's just being nice. It's so simple, but just being a good person is like can get everybody so much further and can accomplish so much in this world.
Absolutely. 100%. Couldn't agree more.
100%. I've been on the receiving end of that. Like I've had moments in my life that have been hard, and just strangers by chance were just a little kind in the right moment, and it made a huge difference. I mean, it really does. Like on a micro level, but as you're suggesting, like on a bigger level too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good to remember that.
Yeah, and I mean that's what this podcast is all about, is like uniting people and from different cultures and different backgrounds. And so it's been really great talking to you guys because you have brought so much of that to this talk with you guys. It's been really, really great to hear your like sharing in that feeling of wanting to unite people and forget all of the hate in the world and just try and move forward with positivity and love.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, of course. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you guys. And I hope everyone goes and checks out your films because they are the Alina's really amazing, and the lighting and everything in that film is gorgeous, and such an impactful story.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
We really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, Rami and Nora, for joining me today, and thanks to everybody listening. Be sure to follow Go Ahead Tell Me on Instagram and share this episode with your friends. Talk soon.